Hey there, I'm Helper Wesley, the creator of Asteroid Dig, Atomic Trail, and recently In and Out Night Burglar, a jam game that did pretty well. So let's get into the devlog. This one's going to be a little bit different because it's not about Asteroid Dig, the game I've been working on to this point. I got the prototype bug. I was sitting in my kitchen staring out at the trees, and I suddenly thought about how cool it would be for our Discord server to have this collective project, this collective thing that we could all contribute to. And then I started thinking about how it's called the Fireside and how to portray a fireside in a little game and how to make it engaging, and then how to continually add more content to the game as people submit it. And since I wasn't entirely sure how to do that, I decided to make a prototype because I'm a slave to impulse. For the most part, I will take these prototype bugs that get in my head, the urge to make something new. Generally, I'll write those into a giant book that I have, and then after I finish writing down everything I need to make that game, I will just close the book, and that's it. I don't touch it afterwards. This one, though, I wrote it down, and it was still there. It was still in my head, so I figured I had to take the little time to make this prototype, just to get it out. So the experience I wanted the player to feel with this game was cozy. Comfortable, relaxed, cozy. And with a fire, that's pretty easy to do. So I started off with the only thing in this game that can be considered gameplay, which is giving characters snacks as they request them. So as they get hungrier, they'll ask for snacks. And you have to drag that snack over to the character, and that's it. You feed them the snacks, and their hunger goes back up again, and you're fine. All of that was pretty straightforward. I just used the draggable object behavior from GDevelop and use that to create it so that when you drag it to a character, it brings their hunger variable back up to full and repositions it back to the starting point. For that, it just picked one of 4 animations for the thought bubble, and then once you've given them that specific thing, then it goes back to the 5th one, which is nothing, so it disappears again. Once I got that straightened away, I set up the radio option so that people could add music to it, which is set up so that every new song you add to the system adds 1 to the variable maximum songs, or the number of songs in the list. And that way, when you're clicking the over arrow, it goes over until it goes beyond the maximum number of songs, and then it repeats. And so that way I can infinitely add songs as much as I want to, and it displays the name and then the author below it. Then I put in the chat system so that people can add stories and art and so on. And so the characters, I wanted them to be able to talk back and forth with each other. So I basically created a chat menu that as it scrolled up, the chat would fade out. I first tried it so that as the chat went up, they would hit these bars and the bars would make it fade out. But that didn't really work out because as they went on to new conversations, you couldn't tell the difference between the old one and the new one. And so I just made it a permanent fading out. So when they first pop up, they're at 255 opacity, which means they're fully visible, and then they slowly fade out. And so when the characters took a pause between conversations, it was very obvious which one wasn't the new conversation, which one was the old conversation based on how they faded out. And the chat system was basically the same thing as the music system. Every new conversation that gets added adds to the number of total conversations, and then it uses timers to decide how things show up on screen. I really wanted can I call this a game? I don't know if I can call this a game. It's something like a game. It's more of an art piece. So I wanted this to look nice. And despite my poor art skills, it had to be visually appealing because there was nothing mechanically special about it. So I used the new dynamic lighting system in GDevelop to make a flickering light effect. It was fairly straightforward because we all know how fires look. They get bigger and smaller and change and fluctuate based on the amount of wood in there and like gusts of wind and so on. So they'll get bigger and smaller over time. So I added a variable that was the min and max size that the fire would get. And so that was the first thing that was added. It goes a few seconds and then it hits this variable and then it resets the timer point. So every time it flickers, it'll reset the timer point, which will change when the next variation size happens. It's more obvious to see in game, but I'll share that now in a second. But on top of that, I made a flickering effect that happens every 0.2 seconds, and that flickering basically it varies based on the event above it. The first event picks the size it'll expand and contract to, and then the second event does that actual expanding and contracting every 2.2 seconds. Then as some final polish, I took my characters that I created for Atomic Trail, stuck them in the game, and realigned some of the artwork, and then I created and added a stone fire pit that I color adjusted to make it look like it was in the same orangey hue, so it fit in better with the scene, and changed some of the depths of things so the UI is above the lighting layer, so it isn't affected by the lighting. And the final result is this. My hope is that anybody that's in my server can contribute music and art and jokes and stories, and then I can slot them into the game and essentially create this common work that we can post and say it's made by the Fireside community, because I think that would just be wonderful. I've never done anything collaborative before because I'm a very energetic person, and I've just never been able to find anybody who can match that intensity. If you can't keep up, I'm just going to plow on without you. And on top of all of that, I have a fear that because of my music and art and everything, I'm not particularly talented in anything. I always feel like I'm going to let the other person down, which is rough, but it's the truth. So the two reasons I don't collaborate with people are those. I'm too high-strung and too energetic to slow down to work with somebody, and on top of that, I'm just not good enough. Which isn't me making fun of myself, it's just that I didn't do these things. This is my first year doing game dev. I've never done art or music or sound before, so I don't feel comfortable contributing to somebody else's work. Which makes this technically my first dip into like collaborative-ish sort of work. And so I hope people will be receptive and join in. Make some music, make some art. It doesn't have to be specifically for the game. I'm just going to post it on screen so people can see it, and then the characters will be like, hey, this was made by XYZ person. If that sounds interesting, maybe consider joining our Discord. It's mostly just a cozy little place where we all make video games and talk about what we're working on and play test each other's games. And if you choose to do that, then I'll see you there.